Today we are going to be determining how to order a roof using an Eagleview. Typically we're going to be using the insurance estimate as well as counting in any measurements that we find to order roofs, but on this one we're just going to be using the Eagleview to figure all that out. The only things that we wouldn't be able to necessarily figure out using the Eagleview would be the accessory count. So how many vents or pipe boots or any other specific accessories are needed. So that's something that we would need to either have photos of. You can sometimes try to use a Google Earth or Google Maps to kind of take a look at the roof and see if you can kind of guess, but the best case scenario would be to go over and take a look exactly on person and figure out what needs to be ordered with that, especially if you've already signed the job. You should just be doing that as soon as you finish up or before you even sit down with them. But we're going to go through everything else. Now, in a previous video, we went over how to get the ice and water barrier and the felt for this specific house. So if you haven't seen that, you can take a look at that video to go through those steps. We're not going to do that a second time, but we're going to start out. So we have already how many rolls of ice and water barrier and rolls of felt, but we're going to start kind of from the beginning. And first we're going to do our field shingles. And so with this, one of the small differences is, at least on this first page, it's showing the tear off, which I like to actually write down as well. And that's in square feet. And so we use squares most typically when we're talking about field shingles. And so as we've done plenty of times, I'm just going to convert the square feet to squares. And so we have 59.21 squares for our tear off. Now, looking at this house, going through the field shingles instruction, it says to find field shingles in squares, take your tear off and multiply by your waste factor. And then we have some rounding rules and an example. The typical waste factors are 10% for gable and 15% for hip. With this roof, this is a gable style roof. So we're going to just take 10%. We're going to do 59.21 times 1.1, and that gets us 65.13. And we are going to round that to 65.33 squares of field shingles. Next, we're going to do our starter strip. And so for the starter strip, it says to find out how many bundles of started order, take your total perimeter, which is your eaves plus your rakes, and divide by 100. So we have eaves and rakes here that we could add up. Another little hint is further along in the Eagleview, there's another page that has a bunch of lengths. And it actually even has a waist calculation that they advise, and it has the pitches broken out. And so if you see in this length, it has the drip edge, which is your eaves plus your rake, so that's our perimeter. So we can just use that drip edge measurement, which is 440. We're going to divide that by 100, which is going to come out with 4.40, and we're going to round that up to 5 bundles of starter. And I'm actually going to just put in the work real quick here of what we did to get this calculation, just in case anyone missed it. So next we're going to go with the hip and ridge shingles. I normally just call it ridge cap. So with ridge cap, it says to find out how many bundles of hip and ridge. You should take the total hip, if applicable, and ridge length and divide by 28. Now, as I mentioned before, this is assuming that a bundle of hip and ridge shingles covers 30 feet, and we're taking just a slight amount off, 6 or 7% off for the waste that could potentially happen. And that's why we're using the number 28 instead of 30. Now, you could use 30, but you might end up being short in some situations. And if we're in an area where the hip and ridge shingles covers 33 feet, well, then you should probably use 30. Or if it covers 25 feet, you can maybe use 23. That's just kind of some general things that you can be considering, and especially once you get into a storm, you can find out how much coverage the Hip and Ridge has from either the senior project manager or the production manager. So we're going to take our ridge length, which we have 185, and we are going to divide that by 28, and that's going to come out with 6.61. And according to our rounding rules, we are going to round up to the nearest whole number, so we're going to have 7 bundles of ridge. What I next like to do is do my total squares before moving on. I put that at the bottom of this just so it didn't get too confusing at the top, but it says to calculate total squares, follow this formula. Total squares equals field shingles in squares plus starter in bundles and ridge in bundles divided by 3. So essentially we're just going to be converting the bundles of starter and the bundles of ridge into squares of starter and squares of ridge, and then adding it into the squares of our field to get our total squares. So we're going to take step 1. We're going to do 65.33 plus our starter, which is 5, plus 7 our ridge. Then we're going to divide that by 3. And then to simplify this, we're going to first do inside of our parentheses. So now we have 12 divided by 3. And then we're going to do our parentheses and our division. And then we're going to finish out that last step with just our addition. So now we have 69.33 total squares. So the reason I like to do that next is because then with the tear off and the total squares, I can start working on some of the accessories. First off, I'll do the nails because that's the one factor that has to do with total squares, and it's kind of a specific number. So to find out how many boxes of nails to order, we're going to take our total squares and divide by 15. So we're taking our, put down nails, 69.33 and dividing by 15. We're going to get 4.622, and with our rounding rules we're going to round up, so we're going to get 5 boxes of nails. Next we're going to do the plastic caps. Now a quick note about plastic caps is I've seen plenty of times where one of the new guys has been trying to figure out how many plastic caps to order, and he divides by the total squares instead of the tear off. So that's important. Don't divide by the total squares for plastic caps. We're just dividing by the tear off for the surface area in squares. The reasoning for that is the plastic caps are used where the underlayment is installed. So we only need to cover the entire roof. Whereas the nails are going for each type of shingle. And so there's going to be, ridge caps, starter, and field shingles. So that's, in some areas, there's going to be 2 layers of shingles, and even 3 layers in some areas of shingles. And that's why we need more nails, and it's ordered off the total squares versus plastic caps just being ordered off of the tear off. So we're going to take our tear off, which is 59.21, and we're going to divide by 20. And that's going to get 2.96, and we are going to round that up to 3 boxes of plastic caps. Now drip edge, once again to find out drip edge, we're going to take our perimeter length, assuming that we're installing drip edge around the entire house. If the drip edge is installed into the gutters, obviously we can't replace that, and if we're not replacing drip edge, we can just skip this step if the drip edge is in good shape and we're trying to keep our profit up that way. But assuming that we are ordering drip edge, we're just going to take our 440 feet and divide by 10, and we're going to get 44. Now with rounding rules of drip edge, there's not really I would say the specific rule, if you want to get really specific, is do about 15% waste, but roughly you're going to add 3 to 7 or more pieces based on the size of the house. So with this one, I'm probably going to add 6 pieces. You know, I could add 7, I could add, 5. 5 would probably be the lowest amount that I would add, but I'm going to add 6 pieces, and I'm going to come up with 50 pieces of drip edge. Just because as they're doing some cuts and they're bending those pieces of drip edge, there is going to be some waste there. And the last thing that you want to do, especially on a busy day, is have to go grab 2 pieces of drip edge to finish out a job. Next, just for practice here, and because we don't have pictures of this roof, we're going to assume that this roof has ridge vent. And this is good practice for if you are installing ridge vent on a house that doesn't have ridge vent already. So we're just going to take a look at the ridges. We're going to go to the breakdown measurement page. We're going to take a look at these ridges, and we could install ridge vent on all of the ridges. We could probably also get away with just installing it on this ridge, this ridge, this ridge, and this ridge, but we're just going to do it on all of the ridges. But the ridge vent is not going to go all the way to the end. Normally they stop about a foot or two short so that they can then put shingles over it and so that it's not open to the elements. And so we're just going to take our ridge vent, and for ridge vent it says to take the linear feet on the paperwork line item as ridge vent, or measure it and divide by 30. So we're going to take our 185, we're going to divide by 30. We are going to get 6.16. Now in this situation, I'm probably going to round down. The only reasons that I'm rounding down in this situation is because, as I mentioned earlier, they're not going to take the ridge vent all the way to the end, and they might not even want to install the ridge vent here. So I'll kind of let the crew decide what they want to do with that. But if they take off, let's say 2 feet here, 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 we got 10 feet that we're not going to be using. And so I think we're going to be fine getting 6 rolls of ridge vent. Now another important thing to consider with ridge vent is when we install ridge vent, we need 1 3/4 or 2-inch nails to install the ridge vent, because it has to go through the ridge cap and the ridge vent and get into the decking underneath, and sometimes go through a layer of shingles and then get into the decking underneath to securely fasten it. And so if you do not, once you get the ridge vent and you take a look at the material that's been ordered, make sure that those nails are included in there, or you're going to have to go pick some up yourself. I normally pick up a big box, the first time that I need it at the beginning of the year, and I keep that with me in my truck at all times, and I take out 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 coils whenever needed per job. But we're going to do 6 rolls of ridge vent. We don't know how many pipe boots in this situation, since we don't have any pictures of the house, but we're just going to pretend that we do have a picture, and I'm going to say that we have 4 pipe boots. Turbine vents, we're not going to have any. Power vents, power attic fan covers, we're not going to have any. Paint and caulk, we're going off of our total squares, which is 69, so we're probably going to do paint and caulk. I'm actually only going to do 3 cans of paint, and I'm going to do 7 tubes of caulk. Now, something with this, it's not going to save you a ton of money, but it's just going to save a little bit of money, and it's more something just to be thinking about when you're ordering. The reason why I only went with 3 cans of paint on this house is because we don't have any box vents. We only have the 5 pipe boots, and I'm going to pretend for this example that there's not any other flashings on the house. So we're normally going off of our total squares to determine the paint caulk as kind of just a general quick and easy rule. But they're using the cans of paint to spray paint any of the flashings. And so if there's not a lot of flashings on a house, they're going to obviously be using less paint. And so I'm going to make that decision because I know that we don't have the box vents to just use 3 cans of paint on this one. So after that, we do ice and water and synthetic felt, which I have already above calculated the 11 rolls of ice and water barrier and 4 rolls of felt. And so that is going to be the end of ordering material for or using an Eagleview, getting all the measurements using an Eagleview.